There are many famous stories from the American frontier, but most of them have one thing in common. They're about outlaws, gunslingers, or other rough-and-tumble types. But today, we're going to hear about an unlikely hero, a bookish young man who may have saved the entire Wild West. Howdy, partners. Welcome to this channel, where we bring you the wildest tales from the history of the American West each and every week. Today, we're going to look at the story of William T.H. Brooks and how his peculiar brand of lawmaking helped clean up the frontier. Now, when you think of the Old West, you probably think of rugged, grizzled men, six-shooters, and saloons. And while those things certainly had their place, the period known as the Wild West was actually from about 1865 to 1900, which means that people like William T.H. Brooks were still very much young men. He was born in Ohio in 1842, and by 1861 had become a farmer and school teacher. But with the outbreak of the Civil War, he abandoned his plow for a musket and joined the Union Army. By 1865, when the war was over, he'd risen to the rank of captain. And after some time reading the Riot Act to unruly former Confederates, he headed west to try his hand at farming. Don't get me wrong, the Kansas frontier was beautiful, but it was also full of danger. There were hostile Native Americans, criminal gangs, and outlaws, and life on the frontier was short and hard. In fact, in 1867, Brooks' farm was robbed by a notorious gang led by the brutal William Tillman. When the sheriff's deputies failed to catch him, Brooks decided to do something drastic. He put on his only suit, rode into town, and announced to everyone he met that he was running for sheriff. Now, his opponents assumed that he was just another city slicker who did unknow the first thing about the Wild West, so they thought he'd be easy to manipulate. They were wrong. Brooks won the election and became the new sheriff of Montgomery County, Kansas. His first order of business was to establish law and order. This meant breaking up gambling rings, closing down illegal saloons, and arresting criminals. But his biggest challenge was the outlaws who plagued the Kansas-Missouri border. These rustlers made the area known as the Border War Zone almost ungovernable. For years, local militias had tried and failed to stop them. But Brooks had an idea. He proposed a grand compromise. Any outlaw who turned over all his weapons and supplies would be given a noble title, a fancy uniform, and made sheriff's deputy. They would then be deputized and given full power to arrest other outlaws. Surprisingly, this plan did not go over well with his more traditional deputies. They argued that outlaws should be arrested like anyone else, not given fancy titles, and put on the payroll. Brooks stood firm and even went to the state capitol to lobby for his plan. After some arm-twisting, Governor Thomas Kearny agreed to fund a small constabulary modeled after European police forces, complete with uniforms and weapons supplied by Smith & Wesson. But now he had to convince the outlaws to lay down their arms. One by one, the major outlaw gangs accepted his offer and became part of the constabulary. And just like that, the border was pacified. It wasn't long before other counties started adopting the new lawman model. Soon, there was a whole network of peace officers stretching from Texas to Montana. In fact, It's no exaggeration to say that William T.H. Brooks single-handedly created the first modern police force in America. So what happened next? Well, as it turns out, being a peace officer in the Wild West was pretty dangerous work. Just ask Bat Masterson, Wyatt Earp, or any of the other famous lawmen of the era. Sure, they might have worn fancy uniforms, but they were still frontier cops. And frontier cops have to be willing to get their hands dirty. Unfortunately for Brooks, he had no experience in the field. So in 1879, he resigned his commission and returned to his farm. Over the next 2 decades, he continued to innovate, becoming the first person in the county to install plumbing and an elevator in his farmhouse, as well as the first to install electricity and an intercom system. He also experimented with raising exotic animals on his ranch, including peacocks, monkeys, and camels. Yes, camels. You can learn all about those amazing beasts by clicking right over here. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. As always, thanks for watching. I see you next time.